Welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, we always grapple with this question, right? How do you tell a visionary from a con artist? I mean, it's a question for the ages.
Oh, it really is.
And today we're focusing on someone who I think really embodies that tension.
Yeah,
Cardinal William Levada.
definitely.
This is a figure who rose to incredible heights within the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
Archbishop of Portland.
Right.
Then San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
Culminating in the highest position ever held by an American
Oh, wow.
in the church prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith.
You know, that's incredible.
So did his actions point towards genuine leadership, or was it all a calculated game of power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And what makes Levada so fascinating is the sheer scope of his influence,
Right.
both in the U.S.
Yeah.
and on the global stage.
Yeah.
We're going to need to dig into those pivotal moments in his career, you know, the decisions he made, to see if we can unravel that puzzle.
All right. So for starters, we have this intriguing detail. A fourth-generation Californian, born and raised in Long Beach,
Okay.
ending up at the very heart of this institution that's historically so European.
Wow.
It's almost the local boy makes good story, but with the weight of church doctrine resting on his shoulders.
And that California upbringing is key to understanding Levada.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Imagine this. He starts at St. Anthony High School, a pretty standard Catholic education, but then it's off to the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome for his doctorate.
Okay.
We're not talking about just any university here.
Right. The Gregorian is like the Ivy League
Yeah.
of pontifical universities.
Absolutely.
And you won't believe this. His dissertation topic was
Let me guess.
the power of the Pope.
Wow. Almost prophetic, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's as though he was preparing for the role he'd eventually play,
Mhm.
shaping and defending church doctrine.
Yeah.
It speaks to a deep-seated ambition, a desire not just to understand power,
Right.
but to potentially wield it. Okay, fast forward. Levada returns to California, now Archbishop of Portland, in 1986.
Okay.
On the surface, we see him revitalizing the seminary, reaching out to the Hispanic community,
Wow, that's impressive.
even overseeing renovations of St. Mary's Cathedral.
It sounds like he hit the ground running.
Yeah, it's the picture of a proactive, engaged leader.
But even before Portland, there were signs that Levada was being groomed for bigger things.
Interesting.
Yeah, he worked alongside Cardinal Ratzinger,
Oh, wow.
the future Pope Benedict XVI,
Okay.
on developing the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
All right, that's huge.
This is a huge responsibility, a testament to his theological acumen
Right.
and the trust he inspired within the church hierarchy.
So he's clearly a rising star.
Absolutely.
Then comes the next big move. Archbishop of San Francisco in 1995. Talk about a culture clash.
Oh, yeah.
A conservative leader in one of the most liberal cities in the U.S.
That's got to be tough.
This had controversy written all over it.
And it delivered.
Oh, I bet it did.
One of the first battles Levada faced was over San Francisco's domestic partners law.
Oh, right.
Now, this law was pretty groundbreaking. It required companies, including Catholic charities, to provide the same benefits for domestic partners
Okay.
as for married couples.
Yeah.
Levada saw this as a direct challenge to church teachings on marriage.
So how does a leader like Levada,
Oh.
someone so rooted in tradition,
Yeah.
navigate such a progressive environment?
What's interesting is he didn't go for a head-on confrontation.
Well, really?
Instead, he reframed the debate, shifting the focus from homosexuality to universal health care.
Interesting.
His argument was that health care should be a right for everyone,
Okay.
regardless of marital status.
That's smart.
By doing this, he cleverly upheld church teachings while protecting the crucial funding for Catholic charities.
That's incredibly savvy. It makes you wonder if this was a genuine attempt to find common ground or a calculated maneuver to protect the church's interests.
Exactly. And this is where things get tricky when we're trying to separate the visionary from the con artist.
Right.
Was this a win-win?
Yeah.
Or was Levada playing a long game,
Right.
using whatever tactics necessary to achieve his goals?
And this leads us to what might be the most defining chapter in Levada's story, the sexual abuse crisis that engulfed the Catholic Church.
Oh, yeah.
It's a dark period that raises serious questions about his leadership and judgment.
Absolutely. In 1992, while Archbishop of Portland, Levada removed Father Joseph Pacelli from ministry due to allegations of child molestation. But, and this is crucial, he didn't report those allegations to the police.
And that decision sparked outrage. Right.
Of course.
People were already questioning how the church was handling these cases.
Yeah.
And Levada's actions seemed to prioritize the institution's reputation over the safety of potential victims.
Precisely, groups like the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, or SNMEA, condemned Levada's actions. They argued that he was more concerned with protecting the church than protecting children.
Yeah.
Levada maintained that he acted according to the prevailing practices at the time,
Okay.
where therapy and monitoring were often deemed sufficient responses.
It's hard to look back on that now, knowing the scale of the abuse crisis,
Right.
and not question whether Levada was truly putting the well-being of the flock first.
And these questions intensified when he moved to San Francisco.
Oh, really?
Another priest was accused,
Okay.
leading to a $5.5 million settlement paid out by the Archdiocese.
Wow.
The criticism mounted. Was Levada truly equipped to lead during such a crisis?
Right.
Or were his actions more about damage control than genuine reform?
So we have this incredibly complex figure, intellectually gifted, clearly ambitious, but also shrouded in controversy.
Yeah.
And despite all this, he's appointed prefect for the Doctrine of the Faith in 2005.
That's incredible.
What does this tell us about how he was viewed in Rome?
It tells us that Pope Benedict VI, formerly Cardinal Ratzinger,
Right.
saw Levada as his right-hand man.
Oh, wow.
They had a long history of collaboration,
Right.
and Levada's staunch defense of traditional doctrine aligned perfectly with Benedict's own views.
Essentially, he was the Pope's enforcer
Right.
when it came to matters of faith and morals.
Exactly. And in this powerful position,
Yeah.
Levada had his hand in some truly weighty issues.
Oh.
The welcoming of traditional Anglicans into the church,
Oh, wow.
the continued opposition to abortion and euthanasia,
Hmm.
even the debates over using gender-inclusive language in liturgy.
So many hot-button issues.
That's a lot.
We're starting to see the full picture of Levada's impact on the church.
Yeah,
But the question remains, was he a force for good,
right.
or was his ambition ultimately detrimental?
That's the question we'll continue to explore. But before we move on, there's one last detail I think is important.
Right.
Journalist John Allen, who covered the Vatican extensively,
Right.
described Levada as someone who could be incredibly jovial one minute
Mm.
and then flawlessly diffuse a tense situation the next.
Wow.
He had a warmth and a humor that people responded to, even those who disagreed with him.
It's almost as if there were two Levadas. The staunch defender of doctrine
Right.
and the charming, personable colleague.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile those two sides? We'll dive deeper into that question in part 2 of our deep dive into the life of Cardinal William Levada. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Cardinal William Levada. In part 1, we explored his journey from California to the Vatican, his incredible rise to the ranks and the controversies that followed him. It's clear he was a brilliant man, but was he truly a force for good in the world?
That's the question we're grappling with, isn't it? And to really understand Levada's impact, we need to delve into his mindset, his motivations. What did he see as his ultimate purpose? What legacy did he believe he was building?
Right? We need to go beyond just listing his accomplishments and dig into the man behind the mitre. And I think there's a fascinating anecdote that sheds some light on this. Apparently, when Pope Benedict XVI informed Levada of his appointment as prefect for the Doctrine of the Faith, his initial response was, "Oh no, Holy Father, not me."
Not me. That's a surprising reaction given his trajectory. It makes you wonder if he was genuinely hesitant to take on such a powerful role, or if it was a calculated display of humility.
And what's even more interesting is what he said next. When asked about being the chief doctrinal watchdog, Levada quipped, "Well, I would say I'm more of a Cocker Spaniel than a Rottweiler." A Cocker Spaniel? That doesn't exactly scream Vatican enforcer.
That comment speaks volumes, doesn't it? It suggests a certain self-awareness, perhaps even a desire to downplay his authority. Maybe he understood the weight of the position but didn't want to be perceived as an intimidating figure.
But let's be real. His actions often contradicted that Cocker Spaniel image. Especially when we look at his handling of the sexual abuse crisis. Victims' advocacy groups saw him as someone who prioritized protecting the institution over seeking justice and enacting real change.
It's important to acknowledge the deep pain and anger felt by survivors and their families. They saw Levada as someone who, despite his claims of compassion, ultimately failed to protect the most vulnerable members of the church.
His defenders, however, would argue that he was operating within the constraints of the time following the established protocols. They might say he was trying to balance his loyalty to the church with his responsibility to the victims.
That's a key tension we see throughout Levada's career, the struggle between upholding tradition and adapting to a changing world. He was a man deeply rooted in Catholic doctrine, but he was also operating in a time of increasing secularization, growing calls for reform within the church, and a society that was becoming more and more critical of institutional power.
So how did this tension play out in other areas of his leadership? We know he was a staunch opponent of same-sex marriage, even in San Francisco, which was at the forefront of the LGBTQ+ rights movement. Was this simply a matter of him upholding church teachings, or was there something more at play?
It's fascinating to look at how he navigated that particular issue. He organized a prayer rally against same-sex marriage in 2004, and he also opposed a city ordinance that would have required Catholic charities to offer benefits to employees' domestic partners.
But didn't he eventually reach compromise on that ordinance?
He did. And this is where we see those diplomatic skills in action. Levada agreed to a revised ordinance that allowed Catholic charities to designate any legally domiciled member of an employee's household for spousal benefits, regardless of marital status or sexual orientation.
So he found a way to uphold the letter of church teaching while still avoiding a major conflict with the city government. Was this a pragmatic solution or a calculated evasion of the real issue?
It's a question that gets to the heart of our deep dive. Can we reconcile Levada's actions with his stated beliefs? Was he a man of principle who was willing to compromise when necessary, or was he a master manipulator who used his intellect and charm to advance his own agenda?
And that tension, that ambiguity continued to follow him throughout his career. Even his obituaries after his death in 2019 were divided. Some praised his contributions to catechesis education and administration, while others focused on his controversial decisions and his role in perpetuating a culture of secrecy within the church.
What strikes me is that even his critics often acknowledge his personal warmth, his humor, his intellectual depth. It's as if everyone recognized his brilliance, but there was this lingering question about whether he used those gifts for the greater good or for his own advancement.
It reminds us that even the most powerful figures are ultimately human beings with their own complexities and contradictions. And perhaps that's the most important lesson we can take away from Levada's story. The need for nuance, for recognizing that there are often shades of gray even in the lives of those who seem to represent absolute certainty.
Absolutely. We can't simply categorize Levada as a hero or a villain. We need to grapple with the full spectrum of his actions, the good and the bad, and try to understand the context in which he operated.
So what does this all mean? What can we learn from the life of Cardinal William Levada?
I think one takeaway is the inherent tension between preserving tradition and adapting to a changing world. Levada dedicated his life to upholding the teachings of the Catholic Church, but he did so during a period of immense social and cultural upheaval.
He was a man seemingly caught between two worlds, trying to bridge the gap between a timeless faith and a rapidly evolving society.
Another key takeaway is the power of individual personalities within large institutions. Levada's story demonstrates how one person's beliefs and actions can have a ripple effect, shaping the course of events and influencing the lives of countless others.
It's a reminder that even within institutions as vast and ancient as the Catholic Church, individuals matter, their choices matter, and their legacies continue to shape the institution long after they're gone.
And finally, I think Levada's story challenges us to think critically about how we assess those in positions of power. Do we focus solely on their accomplishments, or do we also consider their failures, their blind spots, the ways in which they might have fallen short?
It's a question that applies not just to religious figures, but to leaders in all realms of human endeavor, politics, business, even within our communities.
Because ultimately, true leadership isn't about wielding power. It's about using that power responsibly, ethically, and compassionately, even in the face of immense challenges and conflicting pressure.
Yes, powerful insights as always. And with that, we've reached the end of Part 2 of our deep dive into the life and legacy of Cardinal William Levada. Join us for Part 3, where we will examine the complex and often contentious relationship between Levada and the American Catholic Church. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the life of Cardinal William Levada. We've seen his meteoric rise within the Catholic Church, his handling of controversies both in the U.S. and at the Vatican, and the lingering question: was he a visionary leader, or a shrewd operator more concerned with power than with people?
It's a question that becomes even more intriguing when we look at Levada's relationship with the American Catholic Church. Here you have an American-born cardinal, someone who understands the complexities of the U.S. religious landscape, but he's also operating at the highest levels of the Vatican, a historically European institution with a global reach.
So he's almost straddling two worlds, trying to balance the expectations of American Catholics with the demands of the Vatican. How did that tension play out in his decisions and actions?
One area where this tension is particularly evident is the debate over the reception of traditional Anglicans into the Catholic Church.
Oh, right. That was a big one.
Yeah, in 2009, under Levada's leadership as Prefect for the Doctrine of the Faith,
Okay.
the Vatican created a structure that made it easier for groups of Anglicans who were unhappy with the liberalization of their own denomination
Right.
to convert to Catholicism,
Okay.
while still retaining some of their liturgical and pastoral traditions.
This was a pretty big deal. Essentially, the Catholic Church was opening its doors to a whole new group of converts, and it was happening under the watch of an American cardinal.
Absolutely. And this move was welcomed by many conservative Catholics,
Like an Maverick.
particularly in the United States, who saw it as a sign that the church was holding firm to its traditional values. But it also raised concerns among some within the U.S. Catholic Church
Oh, really?
who worried about potential divisions within an already diverse community.
So you have this American cardinal who's seemingly pushing a Vatican-centric agenda, even if it creates ripples within the American Church. Is that a fair assessment?
It's certainly a point of debate, and it speaks to the broader struggle within the Catholic Church, how to maintain unity while also respecting the diverse perspectives of Catholics around the world. Levada was often seen as a staunch defender of the Vatican's authority, but he was also someone who understood the realities on the ground in the U.S.
Another area where this tension played out was the ongoing discussion about the role of women in the Church. We know Levada was a firm believer in the all-male priesthood, but he also recognized the vital contributions of women to the life of the Church. How did he reconcile those two seemingly opposing viewpoints?
In a 2010 lecture at the University of San Francisco, Levada spoke about the feminine genius, a concept developed by Pope John Paul II that highlights the unique gifts and qualities women bring to the Church and to society. He emphasized the importance of women's voices and perspectives, even within a structure that doesn't allow for female ordination.
So he's acknowledging the importance of women, but he's not advocating for any structural changes. Was this genuine appreciation or simply a way to placate those who were pushing for more?
It's hard to say for sure, and it's a question that continues to be debated within the Church today. Levada's actions, particularly in relation to American nuns and their advocacy for social justice issues, were often met with mixed reactions.
Yeah.
Some saw him as a supportive figure, while others viewed him as an obstacle to progress.
It seems like Levada's legacy, both within the Vatican and within the American Catholic Church, is one of contrasts and contradictions. He's a brilliant theologian, a skilled diplomat, a man who held immense power and who wasn't afraid to use it. But he was also a figure shrouded in controversy, someone whose actions often raised more questions than they answered.
And perhaps that's the most fitting legacy for someone who operated at the intersection of faith and power, tradition and change. Levada's story reminds us that even those who seem to represent absolute certainty are often wrestling with their own doubts and dilemmas. They are products of their time, shaped by the forces of history and the complexities of human nature.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we're left with more than just a verdict on William Levada. We're left with a deeper understanding of the challenges facing the Catholic Church, the ongoing struggle to balance faith and reason, tradition and progress, and the enduring question of how to wield power ethically and compassionately in a world that's constantly evolving.
We encourage you to continue grappling with these questions, to explore the complexities of the Church and its leaders, and to consider how individuals can shape and be shaped by the institutions they serve.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Cardinal William Levada. We hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive as we continue to explore the lives of history's most fascinating figures.